You're watching a flight attendant's career crumble in real time as a powerful voice cuts through the airplane cabin like thunder. You just humiliated my daughter because of her skin color on Airline. The woman who thought she was putting a black teenager in her place had no idea she was facing the owner of the entire airline. What you're about to witness is a story of prejudice, power, and ultimate justice that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about discrimination in our society. This flight attendant believed she was dealing with just another defiant teenager who didn't belong in first class. She was about to discover that assumptions based on skin color can destroy everything you worked for in a single moment. Buckle up, because this journey from Dallas to Detroit became a masterclass in why treating people with dignity isn't just morally right. It's the smartest thing you can do when you never know who you're really talking to. Meet Irene Mule, an 18-year-old young woman preparing for what will become the most transformative flight of her life in her modest Dallas apartment. As she carefully folded clothes into her suitcase, her mind wandered to a painful truth that had shaped her entire existence. 15 years had passed since her mother walked out on them, when her father had nothing but dreams and determination. The memory of her 3-year-old self watching her mother pack bags while muttering about poverty and disappointment still haunted her thoughts. Irene paused, holding a childhood photograph of herself with both parents during happier times. Her mother's words echoed in her memory. "I can't live like this anymore. I deserve better than struggling paycheck to paycheck." Those words had carved deep wounds in both father and daughter, wounds that time had never fully healed. Despite her father's current success, Irene chose to live independently in this small apartment, working part-time at a local bookstore while studying business management at the community college. She refused handouts, determined to build her own path without relying on what she didn't fully understand about her father's wealth. The extent of Jeremy Mule's business empire remained a mystery to her, exactly how he intended it. As she zipped up her suitcase, Irene felt a mixture of anticipation and dread about the upcoming reunion. Why would her mother suddenly reach out after all these years? What did she really want after abandoning them during their darkest financial struggles? These questions swirled in her mind as she prepared for a journey that would forever change how she viewed the world and her place in it. Little did this remarkable young woman know that her upcoming flight would expose the ugly reality of racial prejudice at 30,000 feet, and that her father's protective instincts were about to be tested in ways he never imagined. Meanwhile, across town, Elizabeth Waller began her meticulously planned morning routine at 4:30 a.m. sharp. At 34 years old, she had dedicated 12 years of her life to perfecting her craft as a flight attendant, and her apartment walls told the story of her relentless pursuit of excellence. Employee of the Month certificates, perfect attendance awards, and commendation letters created a shrine to her professional ambitions. Elizabeth studied her reflection in the mirror, adjusting her uniform with military precision. Every detail had to be perfect because today, like every day for the past 2 years, could be the day that management finally noticed her exceptional service and promoted her to crew chief. The thought of spending another year serving drinks and dealing with passenger complaints made her stomach churn with anxiety. Her financial pressures weighed heavily on her shoulders. Credit card statements piled on her kitchen counter told the story of supporting aging parents while maintaining appearances. Her boyfriend's constant hints about marriage and settling down added another layer of stress to her already overwhelming responsibilities. She needed that promotion desperately, and she was willing to go above and beyond to secure it. As Elizabeth reviewed her passenger manifest, she made mental notes about potential VIP travelers who might write positive feedback about her service. She had learned to quickly assess passengers, categorizing them by their perceived importance and influence. This habit of making snap judgments about people based on their appearance would soon become her greatest weakness. Her morning affirmations included promises to herself about impressing management, exceeding expectations, and finally breaking through the glass ceiling that seemed to keep her trapped in her current position. Elizabeth believed that extraordinary service meant catering to the right people, those who could advance her career with a single positive review. What Elizabeth failed to recognize was that her definition of important passengers was filtered through unconscious biases that would ultimately expose her true character when tested. She would do anything to impress management, absolutely anything, even if it meant compromising her integrity and treating fellow human beings as obstacles to her success. 20 years earlier, Jeremy Mule stood in a Dallas parking lot with nothing but determination and a bucket of soapy water, washing cars for $5 each under the scorching Texas sun. His callous hands and aching back were investments in a dream that seemed impossible to everyone who knew him. But Jeremy possessed something that money couldn't buy: an unbreakable work ethic and an unwavering vision for his future. The journey from that parking lot to becoming one of Texas's most influential businessmen reads like a modern American success story. After 5 years of saving every penny, Jeremy purchased his first car wash facility, a rundown operation they transformed through sheer determination and innovative customer service. While other business owners saw car washing as a simple service, Jeremy understood that he was selling convenience, quality, and trust. His empire expanded methodically over the next decade. Multiple car wash locations across Dallas became the foundation for his first hotel investment when Irene turned 8 years old. Jeremy recognized that hospitality and service were his natural talents, and he leveraged his expertise to revolutionize the entertainment industry in Texas through his casino ventures. Each business decision was calculated, each investment thoroughly researched, and each expansion carefully planned. Jeremy's casinos didn't just offer gambling. They provided luxury experiences that attracted high-end clientele from across the Southwest. His hotels became synonymous with exceptional service and attention to detail that exceeded guest expectations consistently. The crown jewel of Jeremy's business portfolio remained his most recent acquisition, SkyBridge Airlines, purchased just 2 years ago for reasons that extended far beyond financial gain. Owning an airline represented the ultimate symbol of his journey from washing cars to commanding respect in boardrooms across the country. But behind every business decision, every late-night negotiation, and every strategic expansion lived one driving motivation that superseded all others: providing security and opportunities for his daughter that he never had growing up. Everything Jeremy built was constructed as a foundation for Irene's future, though she remained blissfully unaware of the full scope of her father's influence and wealth. Jeremy's executive office revealed the truth about his priorities through its decoration photographs of Irene at every stage of her life, covered his massive oak desk and lined the walls behind his chair. From her first steps to her high school graduation, every milestone was preserved and prominently displayed where he could see them during important business meetings. His daily routine included 2 non-negotiable phone calls, one every morning before Irene left for classes, and another each evening before she went to bed. These conversations represented sacred time that no business emergency could interrupt. Jeremy listened to her stories about professor, classmates, and part-time work challenges with the same attention he gave to million-dollar negotiations. The protective instincts that drove Jeremy's parenting stemmed from his own experiences with discrimination and prejudice throughout his climb to success. He had shielded Irene from these harsh realities, ensuring she grew up in environments where her intelligence and character were valued above all else. Private schools, carefully selected neighborhoods, and trusted family friends created a bubble of security around his precious daughter. Irene's fierce independence both impressed and worried her father. She insisted on living modestly despite his offers of financial support, working part-time jobs that she didn't need, and attending community college when she could afford any university in the country. Her determination to succeed on her own merits reminded Jeremy of himself at her age, but also meant she was more vulnerable to the cruel realities of a world that might judge her based on her skin color rather than her character. The painful truth that Jeremy carried was his ownership of SkyBridge Airlines, information he kept private to allow Irene the freedom of traveling without special treatment or unwanted attention. He wanted her to experience the world as any other passenger would, never imagining that this decision would expose her to the very discrimination he had worked so hard to protect her from. As Jeremy reviewed his schedule that morning, he felt an unusual sense of unease about Irene's commercial flight to Detroit. His instincts told him to insist on the private jet, but he respected her wishes for independence. That internal conflict between protection and respect for her autonomy would soon prove prophetic when his daughter needed his intervention more than ever before. 3 weeks earlier, Irene's quiet Tuesday evening was shattered by a phone call that would set in motion events none of them could have anticipated. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice on the other end was unmistakably her mother's, older, more polished, but carrying the same tone that had announced her departure 15 years ago. "Irene, honey." The voice began with artificial warmth. "I know it's been 15 years, but I want to make things right between us." The words hung in the air like a challenge, forcing Irene to confront emotions she had buried deep within her heart. The little girl who had watched her mother choose financial security over family love suddenly awakened with all her pain intact. Her mother's carefully crafted invitation painted pictures of reconciliation and healing. "Come spend Christmas with me in Detroit. I have a beautiful home now, and we have so much lost time to make up for." But underneath the sweet words, Irene detected something calculating, something that felt more like manipulation than genuine maternal affection. The conversation revealed uncomfortable truths about her mother's current situation. Marriage to a wealthy businessman had provided the luxury lifestyle she had craved, but apparently couldn't fill the void left by abandoning her only child. "I've missed so many birthdays, graduations, and milestones," she continued, her voice breaking with what sounded like genuine regret. Irene found herself torn between the natural desire for maternal connection and the wisdom that comes from being abandoned by the person who should have loved her unconditionally. Questions flooded her mind. Was this genuine remorse, or was her mother facing some crisis that made reconnection convenient? Had she heard about Jeremy's success and hoped to benefit from their family's changed circumstances? When Jeremy learned about the phone call, his protective instincts immediately activated. The woman who had walked away during their darkest financial struggles suddenly wanted to reconnect now that their circumstances had dramatically improved. The timing felt suspicious, but Jeremy recognized his daughter's need for closure and reluctantly supported her decision to make the trip. The weeks leading up to her departure were filled with emotional turbulence as Irene wrestled with expectations, fears, and hopes that seemed to change hourly. Packing became an exercise in confronting her past as she sorted through childhood photographs and mementos that told the story of a family broken by financial stress and abandoned dreams. Staring at pictures of happier times, Irene wondered if her mother had ever truly loved them or if everything had been conditional on Jeremy's ability to provide the lifestyle she demanded. The 3-year-old in those photographs looked so trusting, so certain that her family was unbreakable. That innocence had been shattered by harsh realities about conditional love and material priorities. Questions consumed her thoughts during sleepless nights. Why now, after 15 years of silence? What had changed in her mother's life that made reconciliation suddenly appealing? Did she genuinely want to rebuild their relationship, or was this another calculated decision based on convenience and opportunity? Jeremy's advice echoed in her mind during moments of doubt. People change, sweetheart. Maybe she genuinely wants to reconnect and make amends for the past. His wisdom came from his own experiences with forgiveness and second chances, though his protective instincts remained on high alert throughout their conversations. The airport goodbye became an emotional moment that neither father nor daughter fully understood at the time. Jeremy's embrace lasted longer than usual, and his final words carried weight that seemed disproportionate to a simple holiday trip. "Call me when you land. I love you more than you'll ever know." Something in his voice suggested he sensed the challenges that lay ahead. Irene's determination to make this journey was rooted in her need for closure and understanding. Whether the reunion led to reconciliation or final acceptance of her mother's limitations, she knew this trip was necessary for her emotional growth and peace of mind. But first, she had to survive what would become the most challenging flight of her life. A journey that would expose her to the ugly reality of racial prejudice and forever change her understanding of the world beyond her father's protective influence. Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport buzzed with the familiar chaos of holiday travel as thousands of passengers navigated crowded terminals, delayed flights, and the general stress of modern air travel. Irene made her way through the bustling corridors toward Gate 23, where Skybridge Airlines Flight 447 would carry her into an experience that would forever alter her perspective on discrimination and privilege. Her boarding pass displayed Seat 2A in first class, an upgrade that Jeremy had secretly surrounding passengers began to recognize the discriminatory nature of Elizabeth's behavior. A middle-aged businessman in 3B looked uncomfortable but remained silent. A young mother traveling with her children whispered to her husband about the obvious profiling taking place. Several passengers instinctively reached for their phones, sensing that something significant was unfolding. Irene maintained her dignity throughout the encounter, responding to each question with patience and respect despite the clear injustice of being singled out based solely on her appearance. Her father's teachings about maintaining composure in challenging situations served her well, though internally she felt the sting of discrimination that Jeremy had worked so hard to shield her from experiencing. The resolution of this initial confrontation came with Elizabeth's reluctant acceptance. "Well, I suppose everything appears to be in proper order." Her tone suggested that Irene had somehow passed a test she shouldn't have been required to take, setting the stage for escalating tensions that would soon explode into a full-scale incident. The arrival of Mrs. Patricia Patterson transformed an uncomfortable situation into a powder keg of racial and class tensions that would soon explode with devastating consequences. At 67 years old, this wealthy widow from Highland Park represented everything that Elizabeth aspired to impress: obvious affluence, social connections, and a kind of influence that could advance a flight attendant's career with a single commendation letter. Mrs. Patterson's entrance commanded immediate attention through her expectation of deference and special treatment. Her designer handbag, expensive jewelry, and imperious demeanor announced her membership in Dallas's social elite more effectively than any verbal introduction. She moved through the cabin with the confidence of someone accustomed to having service personnel anticipate her every need. The ticket problem became apparent immediately when Mrs. Patterson discovered her assigned seat in economy class. "There must be some terrible mistake," she declared with the indignation of someone unaccustomed to inconvenience. "I always travel first class." "Always? This is completely unacceptable." Elizabeth saw opportunity in Mrs. Patterson's distress, a chance to demonstrate the kind of exceptional service that management noticed and rewarded. Her mental calculations were swift and ruthless. Accommodating this obviously important passenger could result in positive feedback, possible commendations, and advance on opportunities that had eluded her for years. The assumption that both women shared became the foundation for the discrimination that followed, arranged while respecting her desire for independence. He reasoned his daughter deserved comfort during her emotionally challenging journey, even if she didn't know the upgrade came from his influence as the airline's owner. As passengers began boarding, the demographic composition of first class became immediately apparent to anyone paying attention. Business executives in expensive suits, elderly couples celebrating anniversaries with luxury travel, and a few families who clearly belonged to Dallas's social elite filled the premium section. Irene's presence as a young black woman traveling alone stood out in this predominantly white, affluent environment. Elizabeth Waller positioned herself strategically at the entrance to first class, her trained eye automatically categorizing passengers as they approached. Years of experience had taught her to quickly identify VIP travelers, frequent flyers, and potential troublemakers. When she spotted Irene approaching with a first-class boarding pass, her internal alarm system activated immediately. The assumption formed instantly in Elizabeth's mind. This young black girl had either received an upgrade by mistake, was using someone else's ticket, or had somehow gained access to first class through irregular means. The possibility that Irene legitimately belonged in that section never seriously entered Elizabeth's consideration, a blind spot that revealed her unconscious racial biases. As Irene settled into her window seat, Elizabeth watched with growing suspicion. The teenager's modest clothing, her nervous energy, and most importantly, her skin color, didn't match Elizabeth's preconceived notions about first-class passengers. This observation would soon evolve into actions that would expose Elizabeth's true character and destroy her career in spectacular fashion. The initial confrontation began with the deceptively innocent approach that characterizes many instances of racial profiling, a friendly smile masking discriminatory assumptions. Elizabeth approached Irene's seat with practiced professionalism, but her tone carried an undertone of suspicion that immediately put the young woman on alert. "Excuse me, honey," Elizabeth said with false sweetness. "Could I take a quick look at your boarding pass?" The request seemed reasonable on the surface, but Irene instinctively understood that other first-class passengers hadn't received similar scrutiny. The condescending term honey, when addressing an adult passenger, revealed Elizabeth's tendency to infantilize people she deemed inferior. Irene's confusion was genuine and justified. Is there some kind of problem with my seat? Her question hung in the air as other passengers began to notice the interaction. The young woman's polite tone and respectful demeanor contrasted sharply with Elizabeth's barely concealed suspicion and growing hostility. Elizabeth's response escalated the situation unnecessarily. I just need to verify that you're in the correct seat, sweetheart. The extended examination of Irene's boarding pass, held up to the light and scrutinized far longer than necessary, created an uncomfortable spectacle that drew attention from nearby passengers. The ticket verification process that should have taken 30 seconds stretched into several minutes as Elizabeth searched for some irregularity that would justify her suspicions. When no problems were found with the documentation, her disappointment was barely concealed behind a mask of professional courtesy. Surely the young black girl in first class didn't truly belong there, while Mrs. Patterson obviously deserved premium treatment regardless of what her ticket specified. This moment revealed how prejudice often operates through seemingly logical rationalizations that mask underlying bias. Mrs. Patterson's sense of entitlement was generational and deeply ingrained. I've been flying for over 40 years, she announced to anyone within hearing distance. I know how these things work, and this is simply not how proper airlines treat their valued customers. Her complaints grew louder as she scanned first class, noting the available space that she believed should rightfully be hers. Elizabeth's calculated decision to accommodate Mrs. Patterson at Irene's expense represented a perfect storm of ambition, prejudice, and misguided priorities. She convinced herself that relocating the teenager would be a minor inconvenience compared to the career benefits of impressing such an obviously influential passenger. The internal monologue that drove Elizabeth's decision-making process revealed a dangerous intersection of personal ambition and racial bias that would ultimately destroy her career. As she observed Mrs. Patterson's distress in Irene's presence in first class, Elizabeth's mind began calculating probabilities and opportunities with ruthless precision. If I can accommodate Mrs. Patterson, Elizabeth reasoned silently, she's exactly the type of passenger who writes commendation letters to management. Someone with her obvious social connections could open doors that have been closed to me for years. The promotion to crew chief that had remained tantalizingly out of reach suddenly seemed within grasp through this single act of exceptional service. Her rationalization of the planned discrimination took the form of seemingly logical arguments. That young girl probably received an upgrade through some computer error or promotion she didn't even understand. Mrs. Patterson clearly belongs in first class based on her obvious sophistication and travel experience. These thoughts revealed how prejudice disguises itself as reasonable assessment when filtered through unconscious bias. Elizabeth's approach to Mrs. Patterson was calculated to demonstrate the kind of personalized service that impressed management. Mrs. Patterson, please don't worry about the seating situation. I'm confident we can work something out that will ensure your comfort throughout the flight. Her tone conveyed competence, sympathy, and determination to solve the problem. The discriminatory plan took shape in Elizabeth's mind as she surveyed the cabin layout and passenger demographics. Moving Irene to economy would solve Mrs. Patterson's problem while demonstrating Elizabeth's ability to handle difficult situations with creativity and customer focus. The fact that this solution would devastate an innocent passenger never seriously entered her ethical calculations. As Elizabeth prepared to approach Irene with her request, she felt confident in her decision-making process. Years of reading passenger dynamics and managing cabin situations had taught her to quickly identify who had influence and who could be safely inconvenienced. This expertise would soon prove to be her greatest weakness when applied through the lens of racial prejudice. Other passengers began sensing the developing situation as Elizabeth's intentions became apparent through her body language and whispered conversations with Mrs. Patterson. Several travelers instinctively understood that they were about to witness either exceptional customer service or blatant discrimination, depending on their perspective and experience with such situations. Elizabeth was about to make the biggest mistake of her professional life, driven by ambition that blinded her to basic human decency and ethical behavior. The moment of truth arrived as Elizabeth approached Irene's seat with a carefully crafted smile that barely concealed her determination to resolve Mrs. Patterson's seating situation at the teenager's expense. Her opening gambit was designed to sound reasonable and considerate, while manipulating Irene into compliance through social pressure and false urgency. "Sweetie, I have a small favor to ask of you." Elizabeth began with the kind of condescending tone typically reserved for children or subordinates. The term favor was deliberately chosen to make the request sound voluntary, while the surrounding circumstances made refusal seem unreasonable and selfish. The fabricated medical emergency provided Elizabeth with what she believed was unassailable justification for her discriminatory request. "Would you mind terribly switching seats with Mrs. Patterson? She's elderly and has some medical conditions that make first-class seating necessary for her health and comfort during the flight." Irene's response demonstrated both her intelligence and her integrity. "I'm sorry, but I paid for this seat, and I'm not interested in switching." Her polite but firm refusal caught Elizabeth off guard, as she had expected easy compliance from someone she perceived as having no real standing or authority. Elizabeth's mask began to slip as her carefully planned approach encountered unexpected resistance. "I'm sure you can understand the humanitarian aspects of the situation. We're just asking for a little flexibility to help an elderly passenger with medical needs." Her tone carried a subtle threat disguised as reasonable persuasion. Irene's follow-up question cut through Elizabeth's manipulation with surgical precision. What medical emergency exactly? And why wasn't this addressed during the boarding process, if it was truly urgent? Her intelligence and composure frustrated Elizabeth's attempts to railroad her into compliance through false urgency and social pressure. The attention of nearby passengers intensified as the confrontation escalated beyond subtle manipulation into open conflict. Several travelers began recording the interaction on their phones, instinctively understanding that they were witnessing potential discrimination that might require documentation for legal or social media purposes. Mrs. Patterson's interjection added generational and class elements to the racial discrimination already evident in the situation. "In my day, young people showed proper respect to their elders and understood their place in society." Her comment revealed the deeper prejudices driving this confrontation, while eliminating any doubt about its discriminatory nature. Elizabeth's desperation began to show as her initial approach failed to achieve the desired result. The promotion that seemed within reach minutes earlier now required more aggressive tactics that would expose her true character to everyone witnessing the unfolding drama. Her authority play represented a dangerous escalation. "As the senior flight attendant on this aircraft, I have the absolute right to reassign seating arrangements for the comfort and safety of all passengers." This statement revealed Elizabeth's willingness to abuse her position to achieve personal goals while disguising discrimination as operational necessity. Irene's response demonstrated wisdom beyond her years. "Whose comfort are we really discussing here? Because I'm perfectly comfortable in my assigned seat and I haven't created any safety issues that would justify forced relocation." Her calm logic exposed the flaws in Elizabeth's reasoning while maintaining her dignity under increasing pressure. The racial undertones of the confrontation became impossible to ignore as Elizabeth's language grew more coded and threatening. References to passenger comfort, appropriate behavior, and cooperation with crew instructions carried implications that extended far beyond their literal meanings in this context. Witness reactions varied according to their own experiences with discrimination and their willingness to intervene in confrontational situations. A black businessman in seat 4C began paying close attention, recognizing familiar patterns of racial profiling from his own travel experiences. His presence as a potential ally added complexity to the developing situation. A young white mother traveling with her children appeared uncomfortable with the obvious discrimination, but remained silent, torn between her moral instincts and her reluctance to insert herself into a confrontation involving other passengers. Her internal conflict reflected the challenges that many well-meaning people face when confronted with injustice. Irene drew strength from her father's teachings about maintaining dignity in the face of adversity. "I understand you have a job to do, but so do I. And my job right now is to protect my right to fair treatment based on my valid ticket and appropriate behavior." Her words carried a moral authority that comes from being in the right despite facing overwhelming pressure to surrender. The escalation reached a crucial turning point when Irene directly addressed the elephant in the cabin. "This situation is about race, isn't it? You're targeting me because I'm a young black woman who doesn't fit your expectations about first-class passengers." Her courage in naming the discrimination created a moment of truth that would define everyone's character going forward. The facade of professional courtesy crumbled completely as Elizabeth's desperation overrode her training and judgment. The promotion that had driven her decision-making throughout the confrontation now required tactics that would forever destroy her reputation and career prospects in the aviation industry. Her public ultimatum represented a complete abandonment of proper procedure and basic human decency. "Young lady, you need to cooperate with crew instructions immediately, or I'll be forced to involve airport security and have you removed from this aircraft." The threat was both disproportionate to the situation and clearly discriminatory in its application. Irene's emotional response revealed the human cost of discrimination as tears began forming in her eyes. "I haven't violated any rules, created any disturbances, or done anything wrong except exist as a black person in a space where you don't think I belong." Her words carried the pain of recognition that her father's protection couldn't shield her from the harsh realities of prejudice. Mrs. Patterson's smugness reached its peak as she observed Irene's distress. "Some people simply don't understand their proper place in society and need to be taught appropriate behavior." Her comment revealed the generational and class prejudices that supported and enabled Elizabeth's discriminatory actions. The phone recordings multiplied as passengers recognized the historical significance of what they were witnessing. Multiple angles captured Elizabeth's abuse of authority, Mrs. Patterson's entitled bigotry, and Irene's dignified resistance to racial discrimination at 30,000 feet. Elizabeth's power trip reached dangerous territory as she declared, "This is my aircraft, and what I say goes." Passengers who refuse to cooperate with crew instructions can be removed for disrupting the flight. Her willingness to abuse federal aviation regulations to enforce personal prejudices demonstrated how discrimination operates through official channels. The final ultimatum crystallized the injustice of the entire situation. "You have 30 seconds to gather your belongings and move to economy class voluntarily, or security will escort you off this airplane." Elizabeth's threat to have an innocent passenger arrested exposed the extreme lengths that prejudice will drive people to when their biases are challenged by reality. Irene's powerful declaration of truth cut to the cabin like a lightning bolt. "I haven't done anything wrong except be black in a space where you decided I don't belong. This is racial discrimination, and everyone on this plane is witnessing it happen in real time." Her courage in naming the injustice transformed the confrontation from a seating dispute into a moral crisis that would define everyone present. Elizabeth's denial of the obvious revealed how discrimination operates through willful blindness to its own motivations. "This has absolutely nothing to do with race. You're being overly dramatic and creating unnecessary conflict where none exists." Her refusal to acknowledge the discriminatory nature of her actions demonstrated the psychological mechanisms that allow prejudice to flourish. The forced relocation began as airport security personnel boarded the aircraft in response to Elizabeth's false emergency call. The officers, unaware of the true nature of the situation, approached with the assumption that Irene had created some legitimate disturbance requiring intervention. Passenger reactions varied dramatically as the situation escalated beyond verbal confrontation into potential physical enforcement of discrimination. Some travelers began speaking up in Irene's defense, while others remained silent witnesses to injustice unfolding before their eyes. The walk of shame that Elizabeth orchestrated represented the culmination of her discriminatory campaign. Forcing Irene to gather her belongings and move through the cabin under security escort was designed to humiliate her into future compliance, while satisfying Mrs. Patterson's sense of entitlement. Irene's internal monologue revealed the emotional devastation of experiencing overt racism. Dad would be heartbroken if he knew this was happening. All his success, all his protection, couldn't prevent this moment of humiliation. Her thoughts connected personal pain to the broader realities of systemic discrimination that success cannot completely overcome. Mrs. Patterson's victory celebration was premature and short-lived as she settled into Seat 2A with obvious satisfaction. Her sense of triumph in securing premium accommodations through discriminatory means would soon transform into horror as the true consequences of her actions became apparent. Elizabeth's moment of perceived success felt hollow even as it unfolded. The promotion she had sacrificed her integrity to pursue suddenly seemed less important than the moral compromises she had made to achieve it. But the full consequences of her actions were still 30 minutes away from devastating her career and reputation. The major cliffhanger that concluded this act carried ominous undertones. In 30 minutes, everyone's world would be turned upside down as the true power dynamics of the situation were revealed in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. From her humiliating seat in economy class, Irene placed a phone call that would trigger a series of events beyond anything Elizabeth or Mrs. Patterson could have imagined. Her tears mixed with anger as she dialed her father's number, knowing that sharing this experience would cause him the kind of pain she had tried to spare him throughout her life. Jeremy answered on the first ring with his characteristic warmth. "How's my favorite daughter doing?" His cheerful tone immediately shifted concern as he detected the emotion in Irene's voice through her first shaky breath. "Dad," she began, struggling to maintain composure. "Something terrible happened on the plane. A flight attendant forced me to move from first class to economy because I'm black, and she wanted to give my seat to an elderly white woman who complained about being in coach." The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening as Jeremy processed the magnitude of what his daughter had just described. Years of protecting her from discrimination, decades of building success to shield her from prejudice, and a lifetime of love couldn't prevent this moment of racial humiliation. Jeremy's fury was immediate and absolute. "They did what to my daughter? On whose authority did this happen? I need names, flight numbers, and every detail of what transpired." His voice carried a controlled rage that Irene had never heard before, suggesting depths of power and influence she didn't fully understand. The investigation began within minutes of their conversation, as Jeremy simultaneously comforted his daughter and marshaled resources that revealed the true extent of his business empire. "I want security footage from every angle of Flight 447. I want employment records for every crew member. I want witness statements from every passenger. And I want all of this information within the hour." His declaration of intent carried weight that transcended typical parental outrage. "I'm coming to Detroit immediately. My private jet will be in the air within 30 minutes. This discrimination against my daughter will not stand, and there will be consequences that these people never imagined possible." Jeremy's phone call to Skybridge Airline's headquarters triggered an emergency response that revealed the full extent of his influence and the catastrophic nature of Elizabeth's actions. Senior executives who rarely worked weekends suddenly found themselves in crisis mode, dealing with a discrimination incident involving their owner's daughter. The realization hit the corporate boardroom like a nuclear explosion. The owner's daughter was racially discriminated against on our own aircraft by our own crew member. This is a public relations nightmare with legal implications that could destroy everything we've built. Vice President of Operations Sarah Chen felt her career flash before her eyes as she grasped the magnitude of the situation. Elizabeth's employment file became the subject of intense scrutiny as executives searched for any indication that she might be capable of such blatant discrimination. Her perfect record, numerous commendations, and years of exemplary service made the current situation even more shocking and inexplicable to management. Flight tracking technology allowed Jeremy to monitor Flight 447's progress in real time while coordinating his response from multiple directions. His private jet was being prepared for immediate departure, while legal teams assembled documentation for potential federal discrimination charges. The damage control discussions in the executive boardroom revealed the scope of potential consequences. We're looking at federal civil rights violations, public relations catastrophe, social media explosion, and potential boycotts of our entire airline. The owner's daughter was humiliated on our aircraft, and we need to control the situation before it destroys our company's reputation. Jeremy's message to his executives was crystal clear. "I want every detail of what happened to my daughter documented with precision. I want witness statements from every passenger who observed the discrimination. I want security footage from every camera angle. And I want the crew member responsible for this incident terminated immediately." The countdown continued as Flight 447 remained airborne with 2 hours until landing, giving Jeremy time to coordinate a response that would ensure justice for his daughter while sending an unmistakable message about the consequences of racial discrimination. Captain Michael Rodriguez received an urgent message from headquarters that transformed his understanding of the passenger situation unfolding in his cabin. The communication was marked with the highest priority classification, indicating emergency instructions from airline ownership that superseded all normal operational procedures. Captain Rodriguez, the message began. You have a VIP passenger in economy class who was discriminated against by your senior flight attendant. This passenger is Irene Mule, daughter of Jeremy Mule, who owns Skybridge Airlines. She was forced to move from first class due to racial discrimination. Document everything and ensure her immediate comfort. The pilot's shock was visible to his co-pilot as the full implications of the message became clear. The Jeremy Mule, our owner, his daughter is on this aircraft and was discriminated against by Elizabeth. Captain Rodriguez had been flying for 25 years and had never encountered a situation with such explosive potential consequences. New orders arrived continuously as headquarters coordinated damage control. Ensure Ms. Mule's comfort immediately. Document all witness statements. Prepare for media presence upon landing. Mr. Mule is en route to Detroit and will board the aircraft upon arrival. Elizabeth remained completely oblivious to the developing situation as she basked in her perceived victory over the challenging passenger. She continued serving first-class passengers with extra attention, believing that her handling of the seating dispute demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership that management valued in potential crew chiefs. Passenger awareness began spreading throughout the aircraft as word of Irene's true identity circulated through whispered conversations and text messages. The young woman who had been humiliated and forced to move was actually the daughter of the airline's owner, making every witness to the discrimination complicit in a historic moment of injustice. Social media explosion was already beginning as passengers posted videos and updates about the unfolding situation. Hashtag Skybridge discrimination began trending as multiple angles of Elizabeth's discriminatory action spread across platforms faster than the airline could monitor or control. Captain Rodriguez's announcement over the aircraft intercom marked the beginning of Elizabeth's downfall. Ladies and gentlemen, we have discovered that we have a very special passenger on board today who deserves our sincere apologies and immediate attention. His carefully chosen words began the process of public acknowledgement that discrimination had occurred. Elizabeth's confusion was genuine as she tried to understand the sudden shift in cabin atmosphere and the captain's unexpected focus on passenger relations. Her years of experience told her that such announcements were reserved for genuine VIP travelers or emergency situations requiring passenger cooperation. The pilot's personal visit to Irene in economy class created a spectacle that drew attention from every passenger on the aircraft. Captain Rodriguez's formal apology was witnessed by dozens of travelers. Ms. Mule, on behalf of Skybridge Airlines, I offer our most sincere apologies for the discriminatory treatment you received from our crew. This behavior does not represent our company values. First-class treatment began immediately as Irene was moved to the premium cabin's most luxurious seat, with the captain personally ensuring her comfort. Flight attendants who had ignored her earlier suddenly appeared with champagne, gourmet meals, and a kind of service typically reserved for celebrity passengers. Elizabeth's dawning realization came gradually as she observed the unprecedented attention being lavished on the passenger she had just humiliated. The pieces of the puzzle began forming a terrifying picture. The captain's involvement, headquarters communication, and the dramatic shift in how everyone was treating Irene. Mrs. Patterson's confusion matched Elizabeth's as her moment of triumph evaporated into growing anxiety. The elderly woman who had felt so entitled to first-class treatment suddenly found herself wondering about the true identity of the passenger she had helped displace through her complaints and demands. The stage was perfectly set for Jeremy's arrival as the aircraft approached Detroit, with every passenger aware that something unprecedented was about to unfold. The airline owner's daughter had been discriminated against by his own employee, and justice was about to be served in the most dramatic fashion possible. Detroit Metropolitan Airport had never witnessed an arrival quite like Jeremy Mule's emergence from his private jet. The business mogul who had started washing cars in Dallas parking lots 20 years earlier now commanded the kind of respect and resources that could reshape entire industries with a single decision. His entourage included corporate attorneys specializing in civil rights law, airline executives prepared for damage control, and security personnel trained in managing high-profile situations. Media crews were already assembling at the gate, alerted by social media posts and passenger videos that had made the discrimination incident a trending news story. Jeremy's stride to the airport terminal conveyed purpose and controlled fury as he approached the gate where Flight 447 was scheduled to arrive. His expensive suit and commanding presence marked him as someone accustomed to wielding significant power, but his primary focus remained protecting his daughter's dignity and ensuring justice of the discrimination she had endured. Flight 447 touched down precisely on schedule, with passengers unaware that the aircraft owner was waiting to board and confront the crew member who had humiliated his daughter. Airport security had been briefed on the situation and positioned to manage whatever confrontation might unfold. Elizabeth's final moments of ignorance were precious as she prepared for what she believed would be a routine deplaning process. Her satisfaction with resolving the seating dispute remained intact, and she continued to believe that her actions had demonstrated exactly the kind of customer service excellence that merited promotion to crew chief. Gate preparation included coordination with federal aviation authorities, as discrimination incidents on commercial aircraft fell under federal civil rights jurisdiction. The legal implications of Elizabeth's actions extended far beyond simple employment consequences into potential criminal charges for violating passengers' civil rights. Jeremy Mule's entrance onto Flight 447 created an immediate silence that spread through the cabin like a shockwave. His presence commanded attention not through volume or drama, but through the quiet authority that comes from genuine power and moral righteousness combined with paternal fury. Elizabeth's attempt to assert her authority revealed her complete ignorance of the situation. "Sir, I'm sorry, but you cannot board this aircraft without a valid ticket and proper identification. Please return to the gate area immediately." Her official tone carried the confidence of someone who believed she still held authority in this situation. The introduction that followed would haunt Elizabeth for the rest of her life. "I'm Jeremy Mule, and I own this airline. I'm also the father of the young woman you just humiliated and discriminated against based on her skin color." His words carried the weight of absolute truth and devastating consequence. Elizabeth's world collapsed in an instant as the full magnitude of her mistake became clear. The passenger she had targeted for discrimination was the daughter of her ultimate employer, the man who controlled her career, her livelihood, and her future in the aviation industry. Passenger reactions were immediate and dramatic as phones emerged to record this historic moment of justice. The confrontation between airline owner and discriminatory employee would be documented from multiple angles and shared across social media platforms within minutes of occurring. Mrs. Patterson's horror was complete as she realized her role in facilitating discrimination against the airline owner's daughter. Her sense of entitlement and social superiority crumbled as she understood that her complaints and demands had triggered a chain of events that would have devastating consequences for everyone involved. Jeremy's control fury was more devastating than any explosion of anger could have been. "You humiliated my daughter because of her skin color, forced her from her rightfully purchased seat, and subjected her to racial discrimination that violated both federal law and basic human decency. Your actions have consequences that extend far beyond your imagination." Elizabeth's desperate apology came too little and too late to salvage her career or reputation. "Mr. Mule, I had no idea. I never intended. This was all a misunderstanding about seating arrangements." Her words revealed the hollow nature of discrimination denials when confronted with undeniable evidence of bias. Passenger witnesses provided statements that documented every aspect of the discriminatory incident, from Elizabeth's initial profiling of Irene through her abuse of authority to force the seating change. Multiple video recordings captured different angles of the confrontation, creating an irrefutable record of civil rights violations. Mrs. Patterson's shame was profound as she attempted to disappear into her seat while surrounded by the consequences of her entitlement and prejudice. The woman who had felt so superior to a teenager based on age and race now faced public humiliation for her role in facilitating discrimination. Jeremy's protection of his daughter was fierce and absolute as he embraced Irene with the love of a father who would move mountains to defend her dignity. "You did nothing wrong, sweetheart. You handled this situation with grace and courage that makes me incredibly proud of the woman you become." The consequences for Elizabeth were immediate and irrevocable. Termination from her position, federal investigation into civil rights violations, and permanent blacklisting from the aviation industry. Her dream of promotion to crew chief was replaced by the reality of unemployment and legal liability. 3 months after the incident that shocked the aviation industry. The consequences and changes were still unfolding across multiple levels of society. Elizabeth Waller found herself working minimum wage jobs while facing legal proceedings that would determine whether her discriminatory actions constituted federal crimes worthy of imprisonment. Skybridge Airlines implemented comprehensive anti-discrimination training programs that became the industry standard for addressing unconscious bias and preventing racial profiling of passengers. Jeremy's investment in education and prevention demonstrated his commitment to ensuring that no other family would experience what his daughter had endured. Irene's strength and resilience transformed her personal trauma into public purpose as she began speaking at diversity conferences and civil rights events about the ongoing reality of discrimination in modern America. Her eloquent presentations reached audiences across the country with messages about dignity, justice, and the courage required to confront prejudice. Jeremy's pride in his daughter's response to adversity grew daily as he watched her turn pain into purpose and trauma. She could have chosen bitterness and anger, but instead she chose education and empowerment. That's the kind of character that changes the world. Mrs. Patterson's transformation was perhaps the most surprising outcome of the entire incident. The elderly woman reached out to Irene with a heartfelt apology and a genuine desire to understand her role in perpetuating discrimination. Their subsequent conversations about privilege, prejudice, and personal growth became the foundation for an unlikely but meaningful connection. The lesson that emerged from this devastating incident resonated far beyond the aviation industry. Treat everyone with dignity and respect. You never know who they might be, what they might become, or how your actions might define your own character. But more importantly, treat people with dignity because they are human beings deserving of respect regardless of their status, influence, or ability to affect your future. The story of Flight 447 became a defining moment in conversations about discrimination, privilege, and justice that continues to inspire people to examine their own biases and choose dignity over prejudice in every interaction they have with fellow human beings.